With that, let's get some analysis now from our panel. Fox News Chief White House correspondent John Roberts, Tom Bevan, Real Clear Politics co-founder and publisher, Katie Pavlich, news editor at townhall.com, and Matt Schlapp, contributor with The Hill. All right, John, you hear these speeches a lot. That was a stem winder.
Yeah, I mean, that was as good as anything that I ever heard of the campaign trail. And here we are, 8 months into his presidency, and the president is relitigating, as you said, Charlottesville. Clearly, he had something that he wanted to get off of his chest, and we were discussing this, that the president had, I think, a clear win last night with his speech about the new policy on Afghanistan. There was some people who complained about a lack of detail, but I think that was deliberate on the part of the president. But now he's completely changed the subject again, and I think a lot of what you'll see tomorrow was the fact that when he was recounting what he said about Charlottesville, that he left out the part that was the most controversial, that got him in so much trouble, even with members of his own party, where he said, I think there's blame to go around on both sides, and that there's fine people on both sides of that argument as well. I thought it was interesting, a couple of things. I mean, he made policy tonight, saying that he'll shut down government if need be in order to get the wall built. And I think that we also saw a nod toward the midterm elections next year, when the president said, if the Democrats don't give you tax reform, they have stood in the way of you getting a big tax cut. That's an argument that they're going to make in the state of California, because the Democrats, of course, are trying to flip a lot of seats there and win back what they need to try to take back the House. So already they're laying the groundwork for that.
Matt, for his supporters, this is kind of catnip, because it has been President Trump, candidate Trump, on the stump, and it's Trump being Trump. However, for people in the administration, there is some concern, isn't there, that they could have had the speech last night last a few days at least before overtaking it by an event like this?
This is, I think, how President Trump likes to kind of strum the chords of driving the message. He is the one driving the message. And for most, certainly Republicans at the national level, if you have a good speech, if you're getting some pretty good feedback on an important issue, you want it to play for a couple days. And that's just not the way he plays the game. What's really interesting, I've noticed over the last several days, you know what we're not talking about? We're not talking about a special counsel, and we're not talking about Russia. We're talking about everything else, and it's interesting that he just keeps flooding the zone with really interesting news coverage, and this will do that again tonight.
Katie.
Obviously, it was a campaign rally, but I do think this was his attempt at some kind of unity by going out in front of a major audience. He knew that a lot of people will be watching tonight, to defend himself and to defend his remarks. I think his staff is probably not happy that he went back to the Charlottesville rhetoric and commentary, but he felt like he needed to defend his words and himself. And what most importantly, I think that something that was important is he said, personally, they are attacking my supporters as if they are racist, and they are not. And I think, generally speaking, the American people, whether you're a Trump supporter or not, are sick and tired of the left accusing them of racism for simply disagreeing with them. If you disagree with taking down a Confederate statue, you're a racist or a neo-Nazi or white supremacist. So adding to that personal level, I think, was important. But in terms of him getting his message out, he's going to get the last word, whether it's a distraction to his agenda or not, and that's what we saw tonight.
Tom, I've said on this panel before that sometimes Washington and New York, maybe L.A., sees it through a different prism and does the scorecard a little differently, perhaps the Middle America and Arizona. What did you see tonight, and does this work for him?
It does and it doesn't, right? I mean, he played all his greatest hits from the campaign into his presidency. Obviously, the crowd, they waited outside for hours in 100-degree heat to see him. He filled the place, 19,000 people. The base is still there. They're still excited to see him. They want to see the show. He puts on the show. But to Katie's point, he started off with these sort of unifying themes, and he had some of that in his speech last night. But then he sort of went off track, back relitigating Charlottesville. If he's going to try and recover any ground and be seen as the sort of president of all Americans and this healer, I'm not sure he made any of that ground up tonight. At the end, this looked like just he was talking to his base, his supporters, about his agenda. I don't know that he was bringing anybody back to him or converting anybody.
Does the media bashing work?
Yeah, it always has for him. We saw this on the campaign trail. I mean, it got to the point where on a couple of occasions he went so far as to it almost becoming dangerous. And I think that, as a responsible leader, he did go too far. And he shouldn't go as far as he did. He went pretty far tonight. One of the other things that was really interesting tonight, too, that I was watching very closely as it was unfolding, and I thought he was about to call an audible, and I could see John Kelly in the back going, No. When he started winding up on Joe Arpaio. And he basically said to Arpaio, don't worry, Joe. You know, you can plan to have a nice Christmas. You're not going to be in jail because a pardon is coming down the track.
Let's listen to that.
Was Sheriff Joe convicted for doing his job? He should have had a jury, but you know what? I'll make a prediction. I think he's going to be just fine, okay? I won't do it tonight because I don't want to cause any controversy. Sheriff Joe can feel good.
Joe can feel good. I mean, it's essentially saying the prediction's coming true.
Yeah, checks in the mail. Don't worry, it'll be there very soon. And I think we could probably expect it in the next few days or so. I mean, you had Doug Stanton, the mayor, saying, please don't do it. It's not appropriate. You had a lot of people who were saying that to pardon him at a political rally would just be the wrong thing for a president to do.
And let's explain about why that's important. The Maricopa County Sheriff, the former sheriff, convicted of corruption in a court as far as...
It was criminal contempt of court.
Criminal contempt.
It's a misdemeanor charge, but he could be still fined or maybe spend a little bit of time in jail. But the president all but said, don't worry, Joe, I'm giving you a get-out-of-jail-free card.
And one thing on the pardon, I know that the president mentioned he doesn't want to cause controversy. There has been a lot of talk on the national level about this being a controversial pardon, but in Arizona, Joe Arpaio was the sheriff for 24 years in Maricopa County. He was wildly popular until just a few years ago, and people in that state do believe that the federal government came in and distinctly singled him out for enforcing immigration law. And in a state like Arizona, as the president pointed out a little bit tonight, illegal immigration is a very serious issue that affects every single sector of the Arizona economy, how people live, the job market, the community safety. And so for him to say it there, of course, he's going to get some applause. But I think as we look at it as a country, in Arizona, Joe Arpaio is still popular and is respected there for the job that he did as sheriff.
Tom?
That was just a classic Trump moment. I mean, there were other moments where he was sort of openly trolling his own staff, you know, and
they told me not to say this.
They told me not to name names. I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but, you know, one vote. I mean, it was just, he had a couple of those moments. He thrives on this sort of thing, sort of, you know, thumbing his nose at conventions. He even joked at one point, he's like, well, they said it wasn't going to be presidential. I mean, he knows he's not being presidential in those moments. And so this is just Trump doing what Trump does, and the question is whether it gets him anywhere.
It was like that moment where he said, they told me not to say it, but James Mad Dog Mattis is going to be my Secretary of Defense. And everybody in the staff went, no, we're supposed to roll out that announcement.
With the whole thing. All right, let's take a listen to that soundbite.
Don't mention any names. So I won't. I won't. No, I won't vote. One vote away. I will not mention any names. Very presidential, isn't it? Very presidential. And nobody wants me to talk about your other senator, who's weak on borders, weak on crime. So I won't talk about him. Nobody wants me to talk about him. Nobody knows who the hell he is.
Okay, that's Senator Jeff Flake, who the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, is defending directly and actually spending money with ads, internet ad right now, but against his potential primary opponent. So we have this battle.
These are the political conventions, right? Mitch McConnell's the Senate Majority Leader. He supports his Republican incumbents. The Republican National Committee has laws that govern what it does in these primaries, and it supports incumbents. What Donald Trump does is he supports people who support his agenda, and he goes after people who don't. And I will tell you, as a strong Republican, but a conservative first, what John McCain did on health care is about one of the worst acts of political cowardice, even though he's a brave man. Political cowardice I've ever seen. And I think there is a huge outcry from people across the country with what he did. He's sick. We should pray for his recovery, but a lot of us are tired of him being in the Senate.